Hello, this is Dr. Elmer, Advanced Neurospinal Solutions, and I have a request from one of my doctors that I'm training. Very interesting case, scoliosis case, a young lady who has a very specific genetic disorder, and she hits fatigue before the end of the day at school and follows a certain pattern. And so, very interesting pattern. When she hits fatigue, her right eye turns inward. That's kind of interesting, don't you think? Why does it turn inward? Why does it turn outward on any given situation? And so we're going to discuss that, why it does that, why it winds up with that kind of configuration. And that when we look at the eyes, the eye movement system is about allowing you to see whatever's happening in your environment, to select things that you want to look at. You have a little dot on the back of each one of your eyeballs called the fovea, and that is where we focalize whatever we're looking at, and it's important to be on the fovea. When the eyes move, the neurology of that movement system is about keeping the fovea equally on both the target on those fovea equally, so that you can get the full effect of the binocularity of the system, so everything looks three-dimensional to you, and so that things don't become blurry. If one of the eyes isn't working as well, the brain over time, because it creates a diplopia or a double vision, it will literally shut that eye down because it can't take two pictures at the same time. And so it will shut it down. We call that suppression amblyopia. And so we want to avoid that at all costs. Well, when the eyes are working, you can have issues. If they're working and you have plenty of energy and strength, it can be okay. But then when we hit fatigue, we may show weakness not only in the eye but also in other parts of the body. Because when we look at the cerebellum from a functional point of view, the cerebellum has a center that we call the vermis, which means worm-like. It's vermiform or worm-like. And then we've got what we call the spinocerebellum, and then the neocerebellum. Each one of these areas has control or effect in controlling our movement systems and far beyond that. But what we need to understand right now is that we have specific nuclei that are about making that system work fully. In the nuclei, we have the vestigial nuclei here, we have the globose and the eboliform here, and then we have the dentate nucleus, the dentate nuclei, which are huge. Now we're going to focus just on these. The dentate nuclei are about your hands and feet, but more particularly about your hands. And it goes to the largest part of your brain within the neocortex. The globose and eboliform dentate, they relate to your elbow, your shoulder and elbow, hip and knee, and they are about controlling movement of your body overall, and not the midline of your spine. And then the vestigial nuclei, the vestigial nuclei are about movement of your eyes, and they are wired. The movement of your eyes are wired to the spine itself. All of those individual tiny muscles that are right around the spine, very close to the spine, they are stabilizers primarily. The muscles that are muscle fibers that are in those muscles are primarily type 1 slow twitch postural muscle fibers. They're about stabilizing you when you go to move. They have to stabilize before you can move. And so the eyes being wired to it, it's very interesting. So if I move my eyes, I'm actually not just moving my eyes neurologically, engaging them through the vestigial nuclei, I'm also engaging neurologically my nerves that engage the stabilizer muscles of my spine. So let's say we look inward, like our patient with the fatigue and the right eye turns inward. If we turn to the left, our eyes to the left, it's the left lateral rectus that is being fired or activated, and it is wired to the intertransverse area muscles on this side, on the same side. That's going to allow me to turn my body on this side that direction in a counterclockwise fashion. Whereas this eye, as it comes inward, the medial rectus muscle, it's wired to the multifidi on this side, and it causes the body to rotate in this direction. Now, what's interesting is she usually is fine, her eyes can be straight until she hits fatigue. That means when she hits fatigue, the neurology that drives the right lateral rectus, that causes her eye to go out here, becomes weak. As it becomes weak, it allows it to come in. It allows it to come in because the medial rectus has a greater tone on it than the lateral rectus. As it comes in, it's going to engage the multifidi muscles on this side, which is going to cause a counterclockwise torque, which, interesting enough, is the direction of her scoliosis. Remember, we talked about before in a scoliosis video that scoliosis isn't a lateral curve, it's a corkscrew, it's a helix. It goes in a torsional fashion, and hers goes in that counterclockwise direction. So when she fatigues, that eye comes in because the vestigial nuclei is weak, but also as it comes in, so do the fatiguing of the muscles that are going to keep her turned outward, which are the intertransverse area muscles. So they are weak, so they are weakened neurologically, so that they come inward too. And so that fatigue factor creates that issue. So how do we avoid fatigue? That's what we need to talk about. When something fatigues, there are reasons for it, especially when we're comparing one side to the other. If it was a total fatigue, they would both do something, right? But this one stays straightforward and this one comes inward, and it creates this torsioning or corkscrewing of the system, which makes the scoliosis worse. They're literally folding up on themselves, torsioning up on themselves. So we always look at first at oxygen is number one. Are we getting enough oxygen? And that's not an easy issue when we're talking about scoliosis, because it always has an impact on the lungs and their ability to the ability of the rib cage to expand enough to get oxygen. If we haven't been breathing enough, or the autonomic nervous system is dialing down, so we're not controlling our breathing mechanism in a parasympathetic way. If we get a fight or flight high breath, we're going to decrease the amount of energy through oxygen, therefore our brain can't function, then it's going to systematically dial down, and it becomes a vicious cycle. It just keeps getting worse. Two is carbs and sugars. Do we have enough carbs and sugars? Because that's the only thing that the brain can operate on. They have to have that. They can't operate on fats. So as we look at that, did we get enough good carbohydrates? Also, we have to look at, when we look at carbs and sugars, we have to realize that the brain doesn't operate with the same insulin response as the rest of the body. So did we get enough carbs in, but also from into the brain? Because if we've got too much insulin and insulin's taking the carbs out of commission and storing it in the form of fat, we're still hypoglycemic, and therefore we wind up with an anemic brain, right? And then finally, activation. If we don't activate the brain, it becomes weaker and weaker. And in order to activate the brain, we must have protein. Protein allows us to go to fire the nerve. The nerve must have the ability to create proteins, and you got to have proteins to make it. If you fire the nerve, it goes through immediate early gene response first. That is cellular housekeeping. That's replacing stuff that's gone bad. As we replace the stuff that's gone bad, the nerve can fire. That's the essence of plasticity, because plasticity means I'm becoming more resilient as a cell. I'm improving. I'm able to handle more and more resistance and more trouble, and that I'm becoming stronger. That's plasticity, but it implies that I've been firing it on a regular basis and going through this process of not only of housekeeping what has gone bad, but improving whatever it is that I do as a cell so that I can do more. And that's what we do with neuroplasticity. So that's got to happen. Now, we can be doing things that affect that, or that bring down our energy significantly. One of the worst things that I see in particularly when kids are at school is the fact that oftentimes they'll be carrying backpacks. Backpacks suck energy horribly on a scoliosis. If I'm like this and I put a backpack on, I just made it much more difficult. It's going to take a bare minimum of 30% of my brain energy to stand up against gravity on any given day if I have a normal structure, if I have the curves the way I'm supposed to, and if I have a straight spine that opposes the force of gravity. But with scoliosis, it's not the case. They have to hold themselves up against gravity. So the more throughout the day I'm using my energy, the more I'm losing my energy, the more I'm not able to do it. Then I add a backpack to it, now it's much more difficult to keep going. So having a rolling backpack is part of the answer there. Having snacks throughout the day in order to get enough energy. One of the things that we do at Advanced Neurospinal Solutions is we do laugh therapy. Sleep is the most important recovery you get. The next best thing is laughter. And so we have our patients, in order to get energy, because it's an energy game, are we going to have all the energy we need throughout the entire day? We're going to have to make sure that we pattern our eating, our breathing, our functioning, and our movement, including the possibility of giving it a nap or giving it a time of laughter that will create the neuroendocrine cocktail. What does that mean? That means the hormonal cocktail that is going to be rejuvenating and bring back strength and energy to the system. And you know about that. I mean, if you've ever gone to a funny movie and you laughed real hard and you came out and you felt so much better, you feel rejuvenated by it. That's because it stimulated the hormonal system to give off a productive neuroendocrine cocktail that would recover you and rejuvenate you. And so those kinds of things. So, but I just wanted to answer the doctor's questions, and thought it would be interesting to many of my not only patients but my students out there. And I wish you all the best. If you have a question, please call and ask. If we have a video on it, we'll send it to you. If we don't, I'll make a video. and the more questions, the better, because we want to answer all the questions. There's so much misinformation out there. There's so much that we know that just ain't so, as Mark Twain would say. He said, what you know can't hurt you, it's what you know that just ain't so. And so much of what we've been taught and trained and indoctrinated in is just plain not true when you start reading physiology, neuroscience, and understanding how the system works, how the structure functions and all that. So I wish you the best and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.